All right. I love participation. I want to know what you want to know. I have lots of strong feelings in this area, but if you're not guiding me, then I might be leading you in a different direction that you want to hear. So everyone raise one hand. I don't care which one. Come on. Hey, everybody. I'll wait. I just want to know that your arms work. Thank you. So when I ask questions and I don't see hands, it's not because your arms don't work. So how many people in the audience here are developers? Primary job. How about security? Primary. Okay, operations? And excellent. Okay, thank you. All right, so why am I up here? Again, I have a lot of strong beliefs and strong feelings for AppSec. I've been doing this for a very long time. 25 years as a developer, more than, so a quarter century, that's weird to think about. I've been in application security for 12. And during that time, the AppSec industry really grew up from where it was with code reviews and pen tests to the more formal processes. As a developer and a development leader, I've also managed change, so taking companies from waterfall to agile to DevOps, and from monolithic applications to microservice-based applications, doing that in those methodologies. So I know quite a bit about the space. I would love to tell you about this now. What we're going to talk about is the things that I see go wrong. So to Tanya's point before, this isn't a negative talk. I want to tell you how to fix these things. This is kind of the reverse about me getting up here and saying, here are all the best practices. What I want to tell you about is, here's the things, if it looks like this, you might not be doing as well as you could be. There is opportunity for improvement. So let's talk about InfoSec versus AppSec. Information security versus application security. This is what InfoSec looks like. We spend billions of dollars as an industry to secure everything. Big moats, high walls. We can detect when they come in. We can try to prevent them from coming in. We spend tons of money on doing this, and it looks pretty good. We've done a really good job, which is why, and I'll challenge Tanya's number here, over 90% of breaches occur through some part of applications. That's the part we're missing. That's the part that we don't do well. So years ago, a couple years ago, I had this thought. Anyone familiar with the Maginot Line, World War II? So after World War I, France said, you know what? I'm sick of the Germans coming in and taking us over. What we're going to do is we're going to build a big wall. That sounds like Trump. We're going to build a big wall, and we're going to stop the Germans from coming in. But what they did is they only built it part way as a barrier. So what did the Germans do in World War II? They didn't go through the wall, see InfoSec. They went around the wall where the fortifications were weaker. They found the soft spot and they attacked that. And there are a number of ways that they do that. But this metaphor really struck me as the qualification of what does AppSec look like today? We're doing it wrong, and we need to make adjustments. All right, so let's talk about our anti-patterns. This one is brand new for me. This is my deepest thought on the goals of your application security program. So for anyone involved in application security, what do you think is the goal of your application security program? Don't be afraid. Yes, sir. Secure application? Functional? Okay, functional application. I'll take that. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, could you, a little louder, please? Resiliency, reliability, recovery. I love that answer. How about our keynote? Okay, so CIA. Okay. All right, and those are all great answers. And this is what people think today. So I want to challenge you. I'm going to take you through a couple of slides here and then see if your answer fundamentally changes. Because I believe everything that you said is true, but I believe it is the byproduct of your application security program, and it shouldn't be the goal. So we'll start with cost. From the time that we talk about building a piece of functionality, we're doing requirements, we're talking about the stories, maybe we're in our grooming session, till the time we get to production, every single phase away from when the developer wrote that code, figure about 10 times more expensive. So once it leaves their hands and it hits QA, 10 times. Gets into staging, maybe another 10. Production, another 10 times. What about when we test? When do we test today? We test after they check the code in, or we test the product before it goes to production in our staging environments. So here I have a metaphor, jet engine. Let's say I build this jet engine. I got a whole bunch of parts. They come into my loading dock. I throw them all together. I put it in a test jig. Now at this time, by the time we get to this stage, I've spent tens of thousands of man hours. I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and built value into this product. Put it in the test rig, and it blows up. Not a good outcome. Why did it blow up? Well, in this particular case, once we've dug down deep enough, one of the fan blades in that jet engine had a microfracture in it that you couldn't see, but when you put it in the jet engine, you bring it up to speed, it blows up. Now the question is, when should we have tested? Should we test it when we have the whole jet engine built, or should we have tested that part when it came in on the loading dock? Or should the manufacturer that we bought it from have tested it prior to giving it to us? You see the difference? To fix this part, let's say we found it out before the engine blew up. We're going to have to pull that whole engine apart. It's not dissimilar to what we do with our applications. We have to break things down, fix it, and then put everything back. So all of the testing that needed to be done is now useless. I have to retest. There's a lot of waste if we wait till the end, but that's what we do with application security today. We wait to the end and hope for the best. All right, so let's talk about a developer. Now, it's an average developer, and for every time that they sit down and write code, they write some amount of flaws. They create bugs. It just happens. So they've done some development, and let's say there's a bug in there. The cost of their development now increases because I need to find it. I've got to track it. Now we're introducing people. So now let's assume for the moment that we found it via computers. But now I'm going to track it. That means I have a triage meeting with people in it. Cost goes up. I need to fix it. Now, that fix might be that actual developer, which is going to be the least cost likely, or I'm going to give it to somebody else. And if it's somebody else, they have to get the context in their head of what was going on at that time to make an appropriate change. Then I have to retest it. So this is like I knit the sweater, I unknit the sweater, and then I reknit the sweater. What if I create a developer that doesn't write those? Because I'll tell you, the OWASP top 10, the majority of those, it's just a simple, if I wrote it this way versus that way. Cross-site scripting, SQL injection, using random versus secure random. It's just a choice when it came out of here. So instead, I teach that developer to avoid cross-site scripting, to not code SQL injections. And guess what happens? Now they develop, and then they develop, and then they develop. I don't incur the cost of finding and fixing stuff that could have been prevented. So, I'll ask again. What do you think the goal of your AppSec program should be? Anyone want to hazard a guess? What if we created secure developers? What if we created a world where it comes out of here secure? I type it and it's right. It can't happen for all things, and there will be things that leak through, things that I will have to find via pen testing or some advanced means, or maybe it's through dynamic analysis. But the fact is, a lot of these things can be prevented. And the way we do this are some things that's similar to what Tanya talked about before. First thing I need is measurement. If I go to the doctor and he says, hey, you've got high blood pressure, I'm like, well, that sucks, but what do you mean? I didn't see it since last year, now you tell me I have high blood pressure. One measurement is not information. I can't say, all he can say to me is I have high blood pressure now, today. He doesn't know whether or not I have high blood pressure. Maybe I, went to breakfast, had a plate full of home fries with a, pound of salt on them. Or I had a fight with my spouse. Of course my blood pressure is going to be high, but there are other things that can lead to that. If I was to measure that now weekly or daily, I would start to see do better, do worse. Am I getting better or am I getting worse? Do I really have high blood pressure or was that just some outlier of the time that I got measured? You don't know unless you have frequent measurements, so you need to have those in place. Take that information. So Tanya started with, give them secure development training if they're developers. Totally agree. But what I'm going to tell you is, even finer than that. They don't have a lot of time and you don't have a lot of time to give to them. What if you took advantage of the measurements that you have and then gave them training on just one thing? Let's say that we have a big problem with SQL injection, which would be a shock to me. Let's say I had that problem. I would fill this room with pizzas. I would open those doors. Developers love pizza. I would then fill the room with developers. I would talk to them over their lunch for 1 hour about the most important thing to me now that is pressing to them that they commit in their code reviews. And then I can measure the impact because I'm measuring frequently, did that help? Because if it didn't help, then why? I need to find another means of getting after these developers, that I have the right people in the room. You need to measure to make sure that you're having that desired impact. Tanya also said this. You need to understand how the sausage is made. If you went to the Scrum Master of one of your DevOps teams and said, hey, you know what? I would really love to be a chicken in your next retrospective. Their head would fall off their bodies. Like, oh my God, you understand my lingo. You're speaking to me in my own language. This is how you build those relationships with them. The last thing, developers weren't trained to do this. It's not that they don't care. It's not that we don't care. When I graduated from college, no training in this. Even developers graduating today. And by the way, it's not just computer science degrees that are coming to us. So even if we had a curriculum where it would be computer science majors and they had to take secure coding courses, what about electrical engineers? I see a ton of those in the software field. Or people that just learn on their own. Career changers. They learn something, they pick up some JavaScript or some Python, and they're like, wow, I love this stuff, let's do it. You have to train them. And you have to help them fix what they find. They don't understand these terms, but you can make it fairly obvious to them how to fix these things, and most of them are very easy. All right, second one, mandate. So I was at a B-Sides conference before in Connecticut in the US, where an OWASP chapter leader got up in front of the security audience and said, we're going to hold the developers accountable. How does that make you guys feel? Feel a little threatening? A little aggressive? This is not the world that you want to live in. The world that we want to live in is for developers to say, I take accountability. I am responsible for the code that I write, because they do that already. Does their code have to function when they check it in? Can they say they're done if it doesn't work the way the requirements said? They say, hey, I did my job, I coded. No, they're accountable for the functionality of that feature. The way we do this, all right, so when we have this mandate, so these are the negative consequences. When you have a mandate, you say, from the top, we're going to hold you accountable. Tanya had a water analogy, mine's a gate. Here's a gate. Developers will find a way around the gate. And they'll do it a couple different ways. Either they'll avoid the conversations altogether, ignore the results, or there'll be the escalating phone calls to my boss and his boss and their boss until we find someone that's bigger than you and they say we're going to ship it anyways. Or if you can really mandate the gate, and very few companies can really do this, you get this result, which is also not what you want. This is not a good outcome. Maybe it makes the security people snicker and say, ha-ha, I caught you. So what? We used to have these arguments at my first startup. Engineers would sit around and we argue about how we were going to do something. And our VP would say, all right, everybody stop, pull out your business card. Now everyone look at the top left of your business card. Hey, guess what? It all says the same company name. That means we're all doing the same job for our company. We are trying to build value here, together. Enemies on the outside, not in the room. So we need to change how we think of this. We do that through relationships. I loved Tanya's slide on roommates. I don't quite think we should be roommates, but you have to have that relationship. You have to go out to lunch with them. You have to talk to them about their problems. And by the way, you also need to talk to them about their goals. Because what's you're likely to find is their goals go this way and yours go this way. They are not aligned. You are not pulling the rope in the same direction. That's the company's fault, not yours. A lot of times developers don't do secure development because that's not what they're paid to do. Their goals say ship code fast. All I care about. Why would I do security? You call into them and say, hey, I got these security vulnerabilities you need to fix. No, I don't. I need to ship this fast. I'm already on the next thing. Sorry, see you later. You have to fix that alignment. You have to have mutual accountability between development and security. At the highest levels of the company. I'm not talking about the masses, right? We've got this pyramid of leadership where at the bottom are hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of developers. I can't fight that battle. What I can do is go to the CISO and go to the CIO, put them in a room with the CEO and say, is security important or is it not important? Because if it is, then we should have this in our goals. It should be development's responsibility to work with us, not against us. We are here to partner. We are here to bring training to you. We are here to help you with tools and awareness. But we can't do it unless you're measured on it. Developers don't do it if they're not measured on it. This is the number one thing that causes your AppSec program to be difficult. If you're finding it hard to get applications secured, and not just the most important ones, which we'll talk about in a minute, but all of them, this is likely the problem. You're pushing, not pulling. So one person against thousands. What are the odds? Not good. Okay, next one. And this was the inception of the Maginot Line concept. I'm just going to protect the most important apps. I would sit down with prospects and say, we're just going to protect the most important applications. What if I had a billing website for my HVAC contractor for a multi-billion-dollar company? Does that sound like an important application to you? Would you think about securing that application? Target didn't. So they phished the HVAC contractor, got credentials, got into their network, and then spread all the way to the point of sale machines. Is it important now? Now it sounds pretty important. We can't ignore the fact that we throw steel doors up for our important applications but leave all the windows open in the house. Attackers know that, and that's what they're going to find. They're not going to bother trying to get through your door. To get after this problem, you have to think about this holistically. You have to at least understand your risk. So having a complete accounting of the applications that you have and map them into a maturity model. So we do a lot with business criticality, but also I believe that you should have a maturity model for these applications. And there's some other metrics that we're going to need to get and report on and look at and set policy on these applications. And some of them are simple. You can create an incredibly simple but effective maturity model with only a couple of measures. typically when I come into companies, they're protecting maybe 5 to 10% of their total applications. I work with customers that have 8,000, 10,000 applications in their inventory. I've seen hundreds of application security programs. Nobody covers them all. So usually most of their applications are in ostrich phase. I don't know anything about these applications. Hey, can we at least baseline them all? Is that so hard? Can we get a baseline to understand the risk at least? Then for those applications that we need to have more security on, let's start moving them up by doing frequent scanning and remediation, being reactive to the stuff that we're getting, working our way. So understand that your application security programs are not going to be stellar the first day out. You're going to have to work on this for years. So you start with that reactive model. You scan, you fix. You scan, you fix. That's okay. Eventually you want to shift that left, and you want to start to be proactive. You're proactive by giving them training and tooling to help them prevent the errors in the first place or catch them prior to check-in. Your assurance scans should not be some mystery to the developers. It should be an open book test that they can take before they check their code in. If not, then what are you doing to them? It's like a motorized goalpost. I have no idea what target I'm trying to hit. You need to provide clarity on what you want and the tooling to measure it. And at least give them the opportunity to fail. Here's the standard, here's the tool, you can run it from your desktop. I'm going to double check you. This is a trust but verify. So we saw Ronald Reagan up there before. Trust but verify. Assurance tests are never going to go away. It's just making sure that they did the right things. Metrics. So again, as you move up the maturity curve for your overall AppSec program, how many scanned versus unscanned do you have? What's your find versus fix rate? Am I getting better or am I getting worse? How do I know? You need to create heat maps of where your problems are, where you should be focusing your limited amount of attention. You don't have forever. You need to get out of the tactics and get into the strategy. You can only do that if you start collecting some of these simple metrics to give you a guidepost to say, this is the team I need to focus on today because their find versus fix rate is way off the charts. We're going in the wrong direction. Part of what you do when you talk to your CIO and CISO is we start to report transparently to the whole organization. Here's where we are. This is not something you use as a stick to attack them with. It's something you say, we want to be better. Here's where we are. It's just truth. They are facts. Then they start to say, one team versus another. So if the CIO doesn't look very good with the amount of apps they've onboarded or the fix rates that they have, then he's going to start talking to his direct reports, and they'll start talking to their direct reports, and so on down the line. They will get to that bottom of that pyramid for you on their own, but you need to have as part of this relationship the fact that you're going to report to the CEO in a transparent manner to say, here's how we're doing. Is that good enough or not? These are business decisions, and that's okay if we decide that we're going to take risk. But let's understand the risk first. All right, the next one. This one just kills me. Open source. Can anyone in this room, besides me, because I can, give me the full bill of materials for any of the applications that they ship? One. I'll take one application. Can anyone do that for one application? I have no hands. So I'll assume that you can't do it for all of your applications. This is where attackers are today. They don't need to understand your first-party problems when you have a raft full of third-party problems. So let's take a look at this. So the Equifax breach last year. Open source, struts. It's a vulnerability that they could have patched. They had plenty of time to do it. But they didn't. I'll assert that they didn't know. They had no idea. And these kinds of attacks just need to be coded correctly. I need to have the right kind of HTTP request to every application on the internet. Remember when the Dyn DNS was attacked? Denial of service, we lost half the internet? They took over the IP cameras that are sitting in our houses. Created a robot army. put code on it and just started spraying the internet. They didn't find Equifax because they were looking for Equifax. They said, here's an attack, and I can automate it. Awesome, I got all this free compute. Off we go. It reports back when it found something, and then I'm going to go look at it and see if I want to do anything about it. And when they found Equifax, yeah, this is awesome. We hit the gold mine here. So understand that this is probably the biggest risk to your company today, and you have no idea whether or not you are vulnerable. And I'm going to assert that you probably are. New code today. So who in the audience applications are monolithic applications, old school stuff? Right, I've got some. I'm sure everybody does. Who's writing microservices, smaller chunks of code? Okay, see lots of hands. 80 to 95% of that code that you're shipping in those microservices is open source. This is like going to Home Depot, which is a building supply house in the US. And then we have all the parts there, right? I got 2x4s, I've got drywall, I've got plywood, cement, all of those things that I need to build a house. I could have everyone in this room buy all the exact same supplies, and then you all build a house, and they're all going to look different. This is how open source works. We take all of this open source, we stitch it together with our little magic and magic smoke, and then we ship it to customers, and it's our own flavor. But it's built out of the same components. It's not more or less secure than your first-party code. So I really want to make sure you understand that. It's not that open source is bad, and I'm not here to say that. Open source is great. It helps us to do awesome things. But as a developer, I will also tell you that when I integrate an open source library that does something I need, I'm done with that conversation after that. I never look at it again. I integrate it, and then I abandon it. So it ages. And it doesn't age like wine, for my French comrade. It ages like milk. There are vulnerabilities in there. So when you ship something in open source, people say it's known good. No, 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 no. It's not known good. It's just not known bad yet. We don't know what's in there. We haven't found the things yet. People will find them, believe me. So understand that that's happening. So let's take a look at an example. So who are my developers in the house again? If I ask these developers here, do you use struts or not in your application? If I ask Tanya, do you use struts in your application? The answer is no. She knows with great deal of certainty whether or not she uses this very high-level framework for an application. And take a look at the versions. This is what we see in our State of Software Security report. We look at this spread of versions. The one that's the highest is also a vulnerable version. We never clean up after ourselves. Developers don't do that. So this is the easy case. Tanya, do you use Apache Commons collections in your application? All right, so I'll give you that, but have you used it in the past? Okay. All right, so she's an exception. Most people won't know because it's buried way down deep inside other components. It comes along for the ride. When I install JBoss, I install struts. It's just there. It's a base library that gets incorporated and included. And here's the spread of those versions. And the ones that are most frequent, like Apache Commons 3.2.1, is one of the most violated. It has a ton of vulnerabilities in it. So let's take a look at that specific version. So here's Apache Commons 3.2.1 and the components that start to include it as it goes down the line. I'd like someone to hazard a guess. Within 5 generations, how many open source components include Apache Commons collection? Does anyone have a ballpark guess? Who thinks it might be in the hundreds? Thousands? All right, I got a couple thousand, tens of thousands. All right, and the rest of you, I guess your arms have stopped working. Over 80,000 components include this specific version of this specific vulnerable library. I hope your eyes just opened up. this is the size of the problem. You don't know that you have Apache Commons collection. So when a CVE gets announced, and for those in the audience that don't know what that is, Common Vulnerability Enumeration, this is the publicly facing announcement that there's a vulnerability in something. When it comes out and says, you got a problem in Apache Commons collection, they're like, I don't use that. Do you use that? Oh, no, we use struts. It's used in millions of applications. And like I said before, developers just abandon it. They're like, you know what? It works, and I don't have to look at it anymore. I have to move code quickly. The way we get after this problem. So this is similar in concept to the roommate thing. But if I have one Tanya, and I've got thousands of developers over dozens of teams, I need an AppSec army. I need people that are in the room when we're having conversations about the application. Now, who can we find in our organizations that are in all of the meetings when we're talking about our applications? How about that team? As we move from waterfall to agile, we change team size from 50 or more to 6 to 12. Small team, and by the way, DevOps is usually run on that kind of agile methodology. Small team, they need to be cross-trained. This is one of the places where you can cross-train them. Find that person that's very interested in this and say, you know what, I'm going to up-train you. And by the way, as a development leader, I don't like bus factors of 1. I'd like 2. I need some redundancy. So find a couple of those people on that team. It doesn't have to be a developer. It could be quality. It could be operations. Give them, start with basics. Checklist, here's the checklist. What we want from them in this specific instance is, I want you to be responsible for creating that bill of materials for your application. I need to have that in a searchable repository, so that way, if a CVE is announced, I can go and look and then find it and say, these are the teams I need to go talk to. I will call up those security champions. This is my product incident response team. I spin them up and say, I have a problem with this specific library that is in your currently shipping application. I need you to come back to me with how we're going to fix it and by when. And then let them do that work. You need a force multiplier. You need to have this. Important thing to consider, as these CVEs announced, they may have exploits on them already. One of the things you need to understand as you're assessing the risk to your company and to those specific applications is, how long is it going to take them to ship a change? And it's not how long is it going to take them to fix this, because that's a different matter. But what you can figure out is, what methodology do they use? How frequently do they update? How long does it take them to test? Because if it takes them 2 months to test their application before they ship it, you have a couple of choices. I ship without testing, which is going to be really risky, or maybe I have to pull the plug on the application. Some companies have done that. So you know what? We have to take that application offline. It's going to take us too long to fix, and it's too great a risk. But if you don't understand that mean time to repair or that mean time to change, then you're working blind. So we went through this with the security champions, right? You need to monitor for new CVEs. You need to take a look at your inventory, understand what's going on, spin up your PCERT, Product Security Incident Response Team. Do tabletop exercises, train them, help them get that muscle to work. This is the only way to get after this problem. We do not have enough security people to go around. We need to build them. All right, so to wrap all this up, in a lot of ways, we are going in the wrong direction. There are some simple adjustments that can be made to make us better as a company. Remember, take out the business cards. Do that with the developers. Hey, can I have your business card for a second? Oh, look, same company name. Maybe we should work together. We're being paid by the same people for the same investors. Let's think about creating relationships and changing the goals. If we create secure developers, guess what? We have now added value to the company. We are no longer a cost center. And you can show this to the people you work for. I made the developers faster because they stopped coding these things. We don't have SQL injection anymore. We don't have cross-site scripting anymore. We don't have OS command injection. They don't exist because I told them, just do it this way. And they're like, Oh, okay, I can do that. You provide them the tools, you provide them the training, you get better results, they go faster. We looked at that example. I don't have to find it, fix it, retest it, all that stuff. None of that stuff has to happen. So think about how you are going to be a partner to development, and if you're a developer in the room, how you're going to be a partner with security. Because once you have that mutual accountability, all of the conversations you have are going to be so much easier. You are not going to be pushing, you're going to be pulling. I see you guys are having a problem with SQL injection. Can I come in and give you training? Love to buy you guys lunch. All right, I thank you for your time. How am I doing for time here? Do I got time for questions? Yes. Yes. Excellent. So the question was, if they're going to start an application security program for the first time, what should they start with? So there are a couple of very simple steps. One is I need to know what applications I have, right? And we can find that a variety of ways. We sometimes have change control boards that change for at least active projects. We can do web discovery for endpoints on the network that are responding to outside traffic and kind of work outside in. We could take a look at our source code repositories or our binary repositories to go find things that we're shipping today. Start there. Take a look at what tools you have available. Go find those tools. So if you're working with Agile or DevOps teams, there are really three things that you need to think about. If you're going to purchase a tool, and you're going to need some tools because you can't do it with pen testers, you don't have enough time, and you can't cover enough ground. And by the way, for the stuff that those tools can find, they can find it for pennies on the dollar. I would rather have Tanya go and find some kind of way of some logic error or some time and state error that only a person could infer and figure out, and have the computers find all my SQL injections. You need to have something that is fast. It needs to fit into the pipelines that they have today and in the work style that they have. Now for waterfall projects, there's a whole lot more buffer room in there. But as they get closer to doing DevOps and shipping daily or weekly, that time frame shrinks and their attitude about that changes. It needs to be actionable. It needs to be incredibly accurate. You cannot have 50% false positive rates. If for every flaw they look at, there's a 50% chance that I'm wasting my time, how much time do you think they're going to take going after that? And thirdly, it needs to integrate in the tools that they have today. You cannot send them a 100-page document or a spreadsheet or a pointer to your SIM or your CSM system. You can't do that. It needs to be in their IDE. It needs to be in their build tools. It needs to be in their bug tracking. If you start making quality and security the same, then you start to have a different conversation. It goes into their triage meetings. It's like, oh, we have things to fix. So that's, yes, sir.
There I am. You were talking about like dependency management, but would you agree that it's actually dependency reduction what we want? Think about what you use and see if you only use the part that you could actually implement quickly on your own very fast, and then instead of using a library where you just use like 5% of the code in there and 95% sticks around and is vulnerable. I heard someone mention in a talk once that if you walk on the site where you're hungry and you find a hamburger, would you eat it? Well, you probably wouldn't, but developers do that all the time. They find a library that does what they need and they just implement, right? So I like the idea of actually reducing dependencies as one of the contents of the meetings that we have all the time, talking about, do we use this or can we do it on our own? We like the concept, so let's re-implement. So then we control the code.
So for anyone that didn't hear, this is about reducing the number of dependencies I have, maybe only using 5% of the library that I've imported. Is that accurate? All right, so here are my thoughts on this. First of all, you're creating more work, right? So it's actual work for them to go figure out what they're using and prune out the things that don't, and then figure out whether the thing still behaves the way that they think it does and should. Second, when the next version of, so in those examples where we have vulnerabilities in known libraries, they don't patch the version that you're using, they patch the most current version. Always do. They will never come back and patch the version that you're using, especially if it's a really old one. So what do you do now? Now you have to figure out, well, what parts how can I upgrade? I can't just take it, drop it in place, retest, and then redeploy. I have to say, well, here's the parts I needed to prune out. It's a cost benefit. I don't hate it, but understand that you're adding more friction to the system than you might need to.
Oh, this is something nice that this library does, but we only would need a very small part. So let's see how we can do it ourselves. So it becomes our code.
So doing it your own, yeah. So now we get into the not invented here problem.
Well, you have to make a decision there. That's what I'm saying. Right?
Yes.
Look at it
Understood.
and then decide what you want to do. But
Yeah.
not just blindly take everything in just because it happens to do what you need.
Right, so I like your metaphor. Mine is open source is like a free puppy, not like a free lunch. Right, there are actual costs. You have to walk your open source every once in a while. You have to feed it. So I don't hate that, but you're adding costs now. Now I have something that could do it in 5 minutes, but I might take a month to go redo it. So if you ask Tanya about, hey, there's this great open source library that does encryption, but you know what? We don't use all of it, so I'm just going to write my own. You won't do it as well as the experts that wrote that library, and you don't get the benefit of any fixes. So now you need to build a competency in encryption that you didn't have before when your primary goal is to sell product to customers. So I understand the intention, but it adds a whole lot of complexity to the development process and time, and now you're going to start to get kicked out of the room. They're going to say, you know what, I don't really want to talk to you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Yes.
Right? Have you seen organizations tracking costs throughout the course of the project? Because in reality, projects get started with a agreed cost. Right? There is a budget.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a 1-year project going on, there is a budget. And some component is allocated to security.
Yeah.
Now we often say that your cost overruns because of security if you do everything on the right.
Yeah.
But I think you hit a great point, and I'm trying to validate that if I were to just track my cost of my resources as you go in your project, if they're spending a lot of cost upfront at the left side of the project, I seem to be doing well. Is that somebody has started tracking?
Yes. So as you go up the maturity model, what you start to track, so initially remember we're an ostrich, then we baseline, and then we're going to be reactive. So we're going to find and fix things, and we're going to see a find fix rate as we go. Now what you're going to then start to do as they get more mature is you're going to start to track incident rate. I don't care about fix rate because I know we're going in the right direction. How often are they introducing something into the source code base? That's your shift left metric right there, right? So yes, it would be good to track that, find out what phase you found it in. I would use back of the napkin stuff and not spend a lot of time on trying to figure out the actual cost, because if you think about any code change that you make needs to be retested. Now, God forbid, and most companies have this, there's a lot of manual in there. There are people involved where I unknit the sweater and then I got to reknit it and then it has to go back through quality control. That is a real cost to having that change be there.
Right, because you mentioned what is the goal of an AppSec team.
Yes.
So if I want to measure my goal at the end of the year, you know, how my AppSec team is doing, I want to track the cost and see whether they are spending less and less towards.
Yes. So there is one project that I'm aware. Well, so my company does this because security is our #1 job. But there are companies, very few of them, and very few projects that actually have no flaws in their source code base for that application. Now, the next question that gets asked. So Tanya talked about writing that check. Why should I write this check? There are no vulnerabilities in there. It's because everything you did before has been working. So you need to start changing what you measure for those very mature teams, to start looking at utilization of tools, acquisition of training, the grades that they get and the certifications that they have in that, to say that that is what's keeping the 0 in my source code base is all the work that they're doing before check-in. So your AppSec program actually looks like it's not doing much after you've made this fix.
Yeah.
But you're years away from that for most companies.
Thanks.
All right. I am up with time. I am here for full 2 days, so I would love to have this talk with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete.